Oh, there it is. All right, so last week we said John's baptism was to prepare hearts for what Christ was about to teach, that Jesus was tested so that he could be a perfect sacrifice for our sins, and that Jesus' mission didn't begin with victory but with rejection. He gets out of the wilderness, he's conquered the temptations, and then he goes after the people to start his ministry, and they say, "You're crazy, get out of here, we're going to stone you, we're going to throw you off the cliff." And Jesus just kind of says, "No, that's okay." So Jesus begins his ministry, his mission, by showcasing his authority, his unity, and his focus on the mission, bringing all back to God as it was meant to be. So, for this morning, we're going to start off by just kind of running through chapter 6 real quick, and we'll go read through a couple parts of chapter 7 as we go. So, if you're looking in chapter 6 of Luke, you'll notice that the first thing that comes up is Jesus being Lord of the Sabbath. And Luke actually gives two examples in this section. And the first is with the Pharisees in the Sabbath, because Jesus and his disciples are walking, just walking out and about. And as they're going, they see some wheat along the path, and they take it and they rub it in their hands like that, and they get the kernels, and then they pop the kernels in their mouth and eat it. And the Pharisees take issue with this and say, "That you're working on a Sabbath. Yeah, that's not right. How could you possibly allow your disciples to work on a Sabbath?" So the question here is, why did the Pharisees think it was unlawful to rub the grain in their hand on a Sabbath? Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, they considered this action right here to be work, right? So the question is was it really work? So let's pose this question first. Were the disciples getting the grain so that they could take it and sell it and make some money? No. Why were they eating? Or why were they taking the grain like that? Yeah, exactly. They were hungry and they decided, oh, hey, there's a field right here. Let's get some of the kernels. Right? So if they're walking like that, where along the field are they walking? Are they walking through the middle of the field? No. Where are they walking? The outside of the field. What was the edge of the field for? People. The whole idea was that God told them, don't harvest all the way to the edge of the field. Don't go through and, if you drop something, leave it on the ground, because somebody that's poor or a foreigner, somebody that's just passing through might need some food. Leave it for them. If you really trust me to take care of you, then trust me to take care of you, and I will make sure that will have a harvest that is so big and plentiful that you don't have to worry. Okay? So the disciples are only taking what was up for grabs. All right? So the purpose of Sabbath is what? To rest. To rest in God's presence. And the whole thing that the teachers and the experts and the Pharisees and all these different people had gotten to really make a big deal was that you weren't supposed to work on the Sabbath. And they took it so far so that they would sit there and say, okay, you can only walk as far as you can in one day on the Sabbath. You're also not really supposed to walk during night, if I remember the rules correctly. And so, for some of you, it would mean that you might not be able to come to church here because it might be more than a Sabbath day walk. Let's see here. Kason, you live out in Lida. Would you be able to walk here on Sunday morning?
No.
No. How long would it take you to walk to the church building?
I don't know. hours.
Okay. So maybe technically Casey could actually come here, but by the time she did get here, it would pretty much be over. Right? Yeah, or wake up crazy early, right? Okay? And so the thing that the Pharisees and all these guys had gotten worked up about was that you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. But when the people were trying to work, if you remember, so the people finally get out of Egypt. God says, okay, I'll put manna on the ground for you so that you've got something to eat. And he says, 6 days, go out there, only gather what you need though, right? What happens if they gather more than what they need?
They didn't follow commands.
Yeah, they wouldn't be following the commands. Bryce, what were you saying?
Like turned into like worms or something like that.
Yeah, it got really like nasty, and yeah, like you said, worms would start crawling through it. It was weird. But on the evening of the 6th day, or on the 6th day, they were allowed to collect more because God didn't want them going out on the 7th day. He wanted them to trust in Him. Okay, and so it becomes an issue of, do you trust God? And the Sabbath is designed to remind us to rest in God's presence and to trust in His ability to provide. Okay? And so the whole problem that comes about with this is that the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, all these guys have made Sabbath more than what it is. Because they're not really resting in God's presence. They're simply saying, okay, we can't work on this day. Okay? And it had become more legalistic than anything else because they would sit there and determine, okay, when could you start working and it'd be technically okay? Is that really resting? If you're sitting there just waiting for the next opportunity to work? No. And so Jesus is trying to remind them, look, the whole purpose is to rest in the presence of God. They're walking with me. I am God here on earth. They're walking with me. They're talking with me. They're eating with me. That's rest. They're spending time with me. They're fulfilling the purpose of the Sabbath. To be with me. And so then the next example that we see is the one of Jesus healing on the Sabbath. Okay? And so a man shows up to the synagogue and Jesus offers to help the guy, and he knows that the Pharisees and the teachers and all this are sitting there thinking, okay, if he heals somebody, that's work. How would Jesus healing somebody be work? How could it be considered work for Jesus to heal somebody?
He's not resting.
Yeah. I mean, he's doing something, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so Jesus understands that, I mean, the whole thing is you can't allow this rule to trump mercy. And so what heals the guy's shriveled hand? Let's hear it. It says in verse 10, he looked around at them all, and then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. He did so, and his hand was completely restored. What healed the man with a shriveled hand?
Because he's God.
Jesus.
Say it again, Bryce.
Because he's God.
Okay,
Faith.
there you go. Now, yes, Jesus had to act, but so many times in Scripture, when we see Jesus heal somebody, he says something along these lines. Go in peace, your faith has healed you. Yeah, exactly. Okay? And so the thing that we have to understand here is that God works through faith and obedience. Sabbath is important, but it doesn't trump these. Okay? Jesus even kind of points it out here in verse 9. Verse 9. He says, I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it. And somewhere else in one of the Gospels, Jesus sits there and confronts the teachers directly and says, look, if you have your son fall in a well on the Sabbath, are you just going to sit there and go to them at the well and go, no, well, tough luck, I'll come back tomorrow, and walk away? No! That would be crazy. And so Jesus is trying to point out, look, if it's okay for you to sit there and go about your business and take care of people, to rescue them, how is it not okay to sit there and heal people on the Sabbath, to take care of them on their needs? And he's trying to go back to what God always originally intended. This is the whole idea of Luke, is to go back to the beginning and say, this is what was intended. And so Jesus is trying to say that the intent has always been mercy, to rescue those that are suffering, and to do so in obedience to God. So going on from here, Jesus picks out his 12 apostles, and kind of like what we're talking about as far as Jesus kind of setting up a new covenant, a new Israel, a new hope. This is Jesus picks 12 because he's instituting 12 tribes again. All right. So going on through chapter 6 here, you've got this whole section of blessings and woes and love for enemies and judging others. And blessings and woes kind of goes around like this. Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. What does that sound like?
Sounds familiar.
Should sound familiar.
Where?
Maybe in Matthew?
Probably.
Good guess.
Sermon on the Mount.
There you go.
That's where I thought I was on.
All right. So if you guys go into Matthew and you look, you'll see that Matthew kind of does the same thing. He has these blessings and all this. The difference here is that, for one, Matthew goes a bit longer on the blessings, but Matthew also doesn't really go into the woes. All right? But they're both followed with these other examples here, like love your enemies, judging others, treating its fruit. Okay? These are things that kind of show up in the Sermon on the Mount as well. The main thing is that in Matthew, it's called the Sermon on the Mount. And here, it's called the Sermon on the Plain. Say what? Or, it's basically the same kind of concept, though. Again, as far as like loving your enemies, same thing that you would see in Matthew. Just God trying to say, look, this is what was intended from the beginning. I didn't intend for you to sit there and say it was okay to sit there and love your friends, but hate those that don't like you or foreigners or anything else. You're to love everybody. Okay? So, let's go ahead and go into chapter 7. And we're going to read through verses 1 through 10 first.
We started on that side last time.
Okay, so then this... No, we didn't. We started over there.
Started with me.
Yeah. So, start with Riley. Alright.
Whoa, there's a new update.
Luke 7. Alright, so 2 verses each. Just through verse 10. So we should stop with Jeff for this section.
When Jesus had finished saying all of this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum, whatever. There a
Centurions?
centurion servant whom his master valued highly was sick and about to die.
The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this,
Because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof.
That is why I do not even consider myself worthy to come to you, but say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one go, and he goes, and that one come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it."
When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well.
Okay. So, first question. Why did let's see here, who did he send? Some elders of the Jews. Why did they think that the servant should be healed? Yeah.
they
Yeah.
tell him to do something and he does it."
That was the centurion's comment. But yeah, they said he deserves to have you do this because of what he's done for our nation. Okay? And so their focus is on this love for this nation and everything. They're focused on the work the centurion had done for them. Jesus was focused on the faith of the centurion. Okay? How does the centurion look at himself compared to Jesus? Does the centurion say, "I deserve to have this happen. Look at everything I've done for your people"?
No, he said he does
No.
not deserve any. He does not deserve who's come under his roof.
Yeah. And so he understands the relationship of Jesus here. He understands that Jesus is a person with authority. He even talks about that and says, I myself am a man under authority. If I say go, this person goes. And so the centurion has a really good understanding of who Jesus is. And so the Pharisees, the Jews, and all these people have this proud idea of themselves and of the centurion, and the centurion's like, "Nah, I'm not that good," and he's willing to humble himself before Jesus. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next section here. Jabin. We're going to go to verse 36 through 50. And then we'll do 2 verses each. 14, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We should end with Dylan. I got it right, yes. We should end with Dylan. So go ahead and start us off with verse 36.
Oh, sorry. 36. You read 2 verses?
Yep.
When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume.
As she stood behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner.
And Jesus answering said unto him, Simon, I have somewhat to say unto thee. And he said, Teacher, say on. Can I change my version?
Yeah, it's fine.
I don't know why I was on that.
I was gonna say, usually I thought I heard you.
I know why I think that. Because it wasn't the right way.
Jesus answering his thoughts, Simon, he said to the Pharisee, I have something to say to you. Go ahead, teacher, Simon replied. And Jesus told him this story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other.
When they could not pay the cancel of the debt of both, now which of them we will love him more? Simon answered, the one, I suppose, for whom he can call the larger debt. He said to him, Yet you have judged rightly.
Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wiped my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet.
You did not anoint my head with oil, but this woman anointed my feet with fragrant oil. Therefore I say to you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. For she has loved, but to whom little is forgiven, the same love does.
The other guests began to say among themselves, Who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus said to the woman, Your faith has saved you. Go in peace.
Okay. All right. So, did Jesus tell the woman her sins were forgiven before she was like washing her feet and all that? No. And it's an important point to understand because she probably was hoping that he would say something to her about her sin. But she still acted in obedience. She still sat there and washed his feet before he ever said a thing to her. And that should be a powerful statement to us. And then the other thing that I want you guys to consider is just how much this, like how emotional an experience this was for the woman. How many of you guys have ever cried? Okay? How many of you guys have ever cried so much that you had enough tears to wet a person's feet? Not just a foot, feet. That you cried that much and that you could take your hair, obviously that's not me, but that you could take your hair and clean somebody's feet because of how many tears you shed. All right? This is the attitude of the woman that she's approaching Jesus before he's ever said anything. So she knows who she is. She knows what she's done. And she knows who Jesus is. And so she has this hope because of who she is that Jesus will forgive her, that he will offer her that peace and that restoration. Okay? So Jesus confronts the pride of the Pharisee here by pointing out what he was supposed to do. He specifically says, I came here, you didn't wash my feet. That was actually a pretty typical thing. You were supposed to have somebody there who was going to wash the feet of the people at the meal. That's why when Jesus shows up to the Last Supper and the disciples are too busy arguing about, who's the greatest, because there's nobody there to wash the feet, Jesus actually gets up and does it himself. And so he's pointing out to the Pharisee, you were supposed to wash my feet. You were supposed to greet me with a kiss. You were supposed to do a lot of different stuff. But you're too proud. You didn't do any of this. And you're so focused on your own goodness that you can't even see this woman for who she is. And he rewards the woman for her faith and her humility. Because she hopes, she believes that Jesus can make a change here. And she recognizes who she is and who he is. Alright? So, this week, we need to make sure that we keep our hearts humble before God and we're always seeking to serve those who need to be brought to him. You know, if you're going to God in prayer and you're sitting there talking about how great you are, you need to stop. You need to backtrack on that prayer and start rethinking what it is. You don't have to sit there and just totally ridicule yourself or beat yourself up, but it's an important thing to keep in mind the proper relationship that we have. All right. So tonight, just pull up. Maybe. Could be. Yeah. Go figure. Okay. Well, just oh, sorry, guys. All right. Tonight we've got Devo at the Dunson's house. That'll be after evening worship. They're gonna do hot dogs and we'll have some s'mores too. Wednesday we'll start at the new series. Friday, if you're going with us to Encounter, we need to leave the building at 2, okay? So that means I need you here at 1:30 so we can get the van loaded up and go. All right? Other than that, there's the sheet on the coffee table there. Elsie needs names and addresses. That's about it. So, love you guys. Think you're awesome.